The morning sunlight filtered through the tall courthouse windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden benches. Tommy Johnson sat at the defendant's table, a 12-year-old boy drowning in an oversized chair. His worn sneakers barely touched the floor, and his second-hand sweater hung loose on his thin frame. His dark hands wouldn't stop shaking as he clutched the edge of the table. Judge Sarah Miller surveyed the courtroom from her elevated bench, her face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. At 45, she had earned her reputation as the Iron Lady of juvenile court, tough, especially on kids from the wrong side of the tracks. Her silver-rimmed glasses couldn't hide the coldness in her steel-gray eyes, a coldness she had cultivated over years of seeing troubled youth parade through her courtroom. "Case number 247, she announced, her voice echoing through the hushed chamber. Defendant Tommy Johnson, charged with trespassing in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. Tommy's public defender, Mr. Brown, looked exhausted. His tie was crooked, and dark circles under his eyes told stories of too many cases and too little sleep. Coffee stains dotted his wrinkled shirt, and his briefcase overflowed with manila folders. He leaned over to whisper something to Tommy, but the boy wasn't listening. Instead, Tommy stared at Judge Miller, his brown eyes wide with recognition. Something stirred in his memory. A photograph his foster mom, Mrs. Chun, had shown him late one night. It was worn around the edges from years of careful handling, hidden away in a box of precious things. "How do you plead?" Judge Miller asked, not bothering to look up from her papers. Tommy's voice came out as a whisper. "That's you in the picture." The pen in Judge Miller's hand froze mid-sentence. "Excuse me?" "The picture Mrs. Chin keeps," Tommy said louder, his voice trembling but clear. "You're holding a baby. That baby is me. You're my mom." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Judge Miller's face drained of color, her practiced composure crumbling like a sand castle in the tide. For the first time in her 15 years on the bench, she looked completely lost. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her hands were shaking now too, rattling the papers she held. "Mrs. Chin told me everything," Tommy continued, tears rolling down his cheeks. "How you were 17. How your parents made you give me up. How you cried when you handed me over to the social worker. She said you wanted me to have a better life, but—" His voice cracked. "All I got was 13 different foster homes and nobody who wanted to keep me." Judge Miller stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Court is in recess," she announced, her voice breaking. She fled to her chambers, leaving Tommy alone with his truth, the whispers of the courtroom audience growing louder in her wake. Inside her chambers, Sarah Miller fell apart. She yanked open her bottom drawer, pulling out a photograph she had kept hidden for 12 years, a teenage girl with tears streaming down her face, holding a newborn who was also crying. She traced the edge of the photo with trembling fingers, remembering that day as if it were yesterday. Her parents had been so ashamed, so worried about their reputation in their small town. "You'll ruin your future," they had said. "The baby deserves better than a teenage mother." They hadn't even let her hold him for long before the social worker took him away. Sarah had thrown herself into her studies after that, trying to bury her grief in law books and case files. She became a judge, thinking maybe she could help other lost children find their way. But she had never forgiven herself for giving up her own child. When she finally returned to the courtroom an hour later, her Iron Lady facade was gone. In its place was just Sarah, a woman facing the child she had tried so hard to forget. "Tommy," she said softly, stepping down from the bench, "I'm so sorry." They talked for hours in a private conference room. Tommy told her about the foster homes, some decent, others nightmare, about the loneliness, the nights he'd spend wondering why his mother didn't want him. He talked about Mrs. Chun, his current foster mother, who had discovered his birth mother's identity by accident and had been trying to help him heal. Sarah shared her own pain, the guilt that ate at her every day, the way she became a judge hoping to help other lost children, how she had tried to find him years ago but was told the records were sealed. "I thought about you every birthday," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "I wondered if you were happy, if you were loved. I kept hoping somehow you'd find your way back to me, but I was too cowardly to search harder." I just wanted you to find me, Tommy whispered. Every time a new foster family sent me back, I thought maybe this time you'd show up. Maybe this time you'd want me. Months passed. Sarah and Tommy began meeting regularly, first at parks, then for ice cream, later at her house. She helped him with homework, discovering he was brilliant at math, but struggled with reading. He taught her how to play video games, laughing at her clumsy attempts to use the controller. Slowly, they learned to be mother and son. Mrs. Chun supported their relationship, sharing stories about Tommy's childhood that Sarah had missed. She showed Sarah his baby pictures, his first drawing, the certificate from his first spelling bee. Each memory was a gift and a knife to Sarah's heart, reminding her of all she had missed. 1 year later, they stood in the same courtroom. But this time, Sarah wasn't wearing her judge's robe, and Tommy wasn't a defendant. They were there for his adoption hearing, with Mrs. Chun beaming proudly from the gallery. As the judge declared them legally mother and son, Tommy squeezed Sarah's hand. "Are you sure you want me?" he asked quietly, that old fear creeping into his voice. "What if you change your mind again?" Sarah pulled him close, her voice thick with emotion. "I've wanted you every day since I let you go. I just didn't know how to find my way back to you. You're my son, Tommy. You've always been my son, and I promise I will spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost." In that moment, both of them finally found what they'd been searching for, not just a mother and son reunited, but two hearts healing together, learning to trust again. The Iron Lady of Juvenile Court was gone, replaced by a mother who had found her way home to her child, and a boy who finally had someone to call mom. That night, as Tommy slept in his new room, Sarah sat on her bed looking at two photographs, the old one of her holding him as a baby and a new one taken after the adoption. In both pictures they were crying, but this time they were tears of joy, of healing, of a future finally beginning. The courthouse would still see its share of troubled youth, but Judge Miller now looked at them differently. She saw not just their crimes, but their stories, their pain, their potential. And in each child's face, she remembered a boy in an oversized sweater who had the courage to speak his truth and change both their lives forever.
If this story inspired you, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts below, and hit subscribe to join our channel for more powerful tales like this. Your support helps us create more content you'll love, so don't miss out.